Okay, so we're going to move on to the next article here.
Right, yeah.
It's basically in the same vein. It was this one is from Bleeding Fool. It's called Who Killed Comics. It was on February 9th, 3 days ago. I know that's 17 years in internet time, but there you go, by a guy named Brian Nemir. It looks like. Sorry if I messed that up. Let's see. Recent post on Who Killed Rock and Roll attracted a lot of notice. It's taken a while to gain traction, but it seems like every day more and more people are noticing cultural ground zero. As the theory's names implies the destruction wasn't limited to popular music. Every form of mass entertainment in the West, from movies to television to comics, suffered a creative collapse in 1997. Comic books seemed like an outlier in this reckoning. After all, superhero movies so dominated Hollywood that it feels like cape flicks are the only films they make anymore. Well, okay. But that's a symptom of a larger issue. Sales of comics themselves have imploded, and they did so decades ago. The only reason they're still published are A, Gen Y nerds wallowing in nostalgia. That's 90s people, I guess. Forget about us Gen Xers or whatever the hell you call Eric's. To maintain IP rights for big studios whose parent companies also happen to own the publishers. Contrary to the veneer of popularity bestowed by Hollywood, American comics are dead. Today's bestsellers only move number of copies that would have gotten them canceled back in the 80s. It's not kids buying the comic book, buying the new books either. It's pop cultists in their 40s and 50s and 60s.
I'm in my 30s still.
Oh, there you go.
1 more year.
My local comic shop is closing. Everything is 75% off, says Quest Bro. Let me break this down. I can't enlarge the pic, but it says picture 1 and 2, the top ones, are Western comics, and the shelves are filled. And picture 3 and 4, manga and wargaming Warhammer. It says it all. So how did it come to this point? Who killed comics, or American comics? As with every unsolved crime from Lindenberg to Kennedy, there are as many theories as people. It was the 90s speculator bubble, some say, when stunt marketing like variant covers couldn't keep it pumped up. The bubble burst and took down the direct market. That's not exactly what happened. What happened was it was a speculator's market, and people were buying far more comics than they actually needed because comic books were going to put your kids through college. And Marvel was so happy to oblige, more so than DC. DC was still there. And it got to the point where they were printing so much more than was necessary. And it kind of fell in on itself when the audience was no longer buying 18 copies of every number one. Some say it was the death of Superman. I would blame Turok number 1 if you're going to put it on one issue more so. But yeah, there you go. And that's a little short version of what happened. There's a lot more to it. So, yeah, others point the finger at the woke cult for subverting the big 2 comic book publishers, but few notice that none of these theories are mutually exclusive. The American comic book industry is like an elephant, a dead one. Fans are groping in the dark for a cause of death. Shedding a little light on the matter is all it takes to solve the mystery. So, here's who killed comics. All right. Anything to say so far?
Rob Liefeld killed it with his bad heart.
Well, if you don't have a foot to stand on, you're going to fall. Yes. Reading is passe now, says Urban Hermit, which I think he also mentioned something about video games. And that's one thing. There's so much more than comics to entertain people. And you're right. I babysat my nieces, and they didn't pick up a book. They didn't pick up one of the comics to check it out. They were on their screens constantly. I had to tell them to go outside a couple of times.
They also have a bad track of history of hiring people who aren't fans of the comic books. They're fans of themselves.
Uh-huh.
That's why I get a lot of self-inserts. Why I get a lot of retcons, changing things.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go into this. It says longtime readers may remember friend of the blog Research Guy, while rebuilding his childhood comic book collection, he created an index of back issues spanning from the 1950s. He united a list, highlighted major events, given issues contained, first appearances, popular characters, introducing key and universe concepts. By the way, Key Collector has fucked up collecting comics. It's like, forget about collecting 1 through 100 of the Avengers. Now all you got to do is get these particular issues. And somebody who wants the entire collection now has to pay $25,000 for the first appearance of Guacamole Man.
Damn, I got it for 20.
Pardon?
I got it for 20.
Well, then lucky you. All of that catalog yielded extraordinary insights. Research guy noticed patterns presented in almost all comic book published within certain time frames. It was like an American Comics had an industry-wide meta arc that featured these well-defined phases. Number 1, growth, 1960s. Iconic new characters debut regularly. Major concepts that will shape continuity introduced. Universe-defining events frequently take place. Maturity, 1970s through 80s. Introduction of new ideas tapers off as series hit their stride. Eventful individual issues still common. Stagnation, the 80s and 90s. Writing quality declines. Increased reliance on gimmicks to drive sales. This includes replacing beloved icons with diversity doppelgangers and the first sign of wokeness. Okay, first of all, the presence of does not, what's the word I'm looking for? The presence of is not a telltale sign of wokeness.
Having a guy or having a girl or a black person or Asian, just sense, yeah,
right. Just having that doesn't mean it's woke. Go on ahead, Dom.
It's a classic case of correlation does not equate to causation. Thank
you. That's what I was trying to say, but I appreciate you. I appreciate you filling out the blank there, man.
Can you spell that out for us?
Yes. It's like, okay, let's go back to.
I mean, at the same time, though, that was a gimmick that started to become more and more prevalent. Now, it didn't necessarily mean that it was woke, but it was a gimmick to try and drive sales, not necessarily based on story.
Now,
also think of the short term instead of long term.
That was definitely a big thing there. But the thing is also, let's point out one of what would be considered woke today if they did it with the same mindset. And that's Sandman. Sandman had a lot of the stuff that would be called woke today, not because it was in the book, but because of why and how it was in the book. You can have the Falcon take over for Captain America. Sure, okay. And you know it's because it would have been a natural progression to whatever the story they were writing. Or I guess I should use the example that was there. James Rhodes taking over for Iron Man. He didn't do it because he was black. He did it because he was the right guy for the job. Nowadays, it would be, well, we need to put a black guy in there.
They'd make 20 racists.
Or even Monica Rambeau. Well, who ended up becoming the second Captain Marvel after Marvel died of cancer. And back then, like she didn't know about Marvel or his death, but when she did later on after talking to his friends, she not only became her own character but also honored Marvel's legacy.
Yep.
I was gonna say if the whole James Rhodes story is him becoming Iron Man was today, it'd be Jace Fox.
Yeah, I was reading a backup story in some old romance comic yesterday, and it was this girl whose best friend was the white girl whose best friend was a black girl 1 year older than her. Black girl's dad was a doctor, and they were close, and she looked out for blah blah blah. It's a 10-12 page story. The race did not come up once. It's just one set of characters were darker than the others. This was 1971. You couldn't do that same story in 2024 without filling it with identity politics.
Well, there was also diversity of thought. Like you had characters who were classically liberal, classically conservative, libertarian, moderate, or even apolitical. But where they leaned politically didn't matter. It's just as a supplementary of those characters. What matters is, no pun intended, is the character's character and their actions.
Yeah. Well, they're also if you go back, like again, when I was a boy, the Republicans and Democrats basically wanted the same thing. They might have slightly differed on how to get there. Now it's a canyon between the two, between conservatives and progressives. I don't say Republican and Democrat because they're the same fucking thing now. But and that's another reason why we get, there's so much identity politics, because the people that are in charge of these properties now are identitarian.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was also,
Alright.
and also like the experimental art, or that only caters to a certain niche within the population that also alienates longtime readers.
All right, let's move forward here. It says Decay was the mid '90s and mid aughts narrative wasteland in which nothing of consequence happens for years. The worst aspect of sales gimmicks and nascent wokeness combined with in the following pattern: iconic character killed off, series reboot with new issue #1, often replacing venerable lead with diversity character, original numbering and lead character quietly brought back a few months later. I don't know if I agree with this. I mean, decay in the quality maybe of writing, but this is the year of Infinite Crisis, or the years of Infinite Crisis and the Identity Crisis. I would say stuff happened.
Yeah, and also stuff happened in J. Michael Straczynski's Spider-Man run.
Or the Grant Morrison JLA. I don't know if he's right about that. I would go more towards the mid 2000s.
Mid to late 2000s.
Yeah,
is
that
more
I
correct.
would. And then you've got Death, the shambling zombie status of 2013 through now.
That'll agree with.
Yes.
Yeah.
It goes on to say it was Combat Framed Exceed concept artist Art Anon who pointed out the website of Fantastic Four superfan Chris Tolworthy. Good Lord, that's a lot of, just go to this one. Quite independently, Chris gathered supporting evidence and the rise and fall of Marvel Universe, Fantastic Four #1, Marvel Sells Out, 1968, Marvel Triumphant, 1973, last dated event was 1980. What? The Death of the Marvel Universe, 1991, Marvel's bankrupt in 1986.
Where on the graphic does it show pirated websites for comic books? They killed it.
Well, this one
Straight
apparently goes up to the bankruptcy, and he's talking about Marvel becomes #1. Mark Goodman sells Marvel to the Perfect Film and Chemical Corporation. Marvel expansion, more titles, less time on each title, emphasis on characters as brands. Real time begins to stretch. Note, Franklin Richards was born in 1967. Death of Gwen Stacy, end of the Silver Age. Various stories make it clear that Marvel time is not in real time. Early 1970s success of Kung Fu and Conan. Marvel grabs DC sales with lower cover price. DC sales decline. 80. Last major dated event is the death of Jean Grey. Later dated events are inconsequential. Let's see. Early 1980s Jim Shooter reigns. Several classic runs. Comics arrive on time. Single issue stories. Direct sales, etc. Continuity meltdown. Clone Saga. Bony Wolverine. Young Iron Man. Alicia is a Skrull, etc., etc., etc. Mid-1990s sales gimmicks. The image effect. Writers are unimportant. Investment bubble bursts. And then 1996 endless reboots, retcons, Heroes Reborn, 2099, 1602, Adventures Ultimates, Zombie, One More Day, etc., etc. Go on ahead, Eric.
I did not see that coming.
What?
That's for Vegas.
Alicia?
Daddy.
Oh, there you go.
We're not in this.
Little cross promotion here.
All right.
Check out the Geek Puppet Show.
So it goes, the events noted on the timeline map almost perfectly rematched, perfectly to Research Guy's arc. So he says 1961 to 67 under the guidance of Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Marvel's regular titles organically grow. 1963 stands as a high water mark for creation of Marvel's new characters. 68 to 73, the end of the Silver Age. Marvel sold the Gordon Gekko prototype, Martin S. Ackerman. Okay, one of the things they're missing so far is the fact that in the late 80s, they sold to a bigger, more actual Gordon Gekko type that decided the only way they're going to win is if they flood the freaking market.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but it started, I mean, basically that's just an expansion of what Ackerman did. So, I mean, it still started in 68 to 73, and then the new buyers basically came in and, just did that on steroids. So
okay, Lee's misguided directive to give readers the illusion of change instead of real change renders dramatic tension impossible. Readers catch on that the status quo ante will always return, and there are no more great universe wide opening stories after this point, though great standalone stories are still being published. 1991, character development rolled back and further character development forbidden by editorial fiat. And then in 1996, the heroes were born, and Amalgam Events kills Marvel 30-plus year of continuity. Marvel goes bankrupt. New owners cement the shift in focus from publishing single floppies to movie licensing. And that's also when we get the written for the trades, which started with the Grant Morrison, JLA, and then went into the Marvel Universe with the Ultimates and Bendis's Daredevil and so forth and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just make again, being a big Amalgam fan, that should be in there because that had nothing to do with killing continuity. That was just basically a one-off thing for a couple of years of merging. Now, Heroes Reborn, yeah, that definitely had an impact on continuity.
That, as well as Deathmate, I mean, like the crossover between Image and Valiant Comics.
Well, that killed a company.
Let me see what's going on. The first black man to wear the Iron Man armor was Eddie March. Let me find the issue. Thank you. Byrne ruled the 90s as well as the 80s. Let's see. Unless, of course, they're being pirated at a higher rate. I don't know what that was the beginning of. When someone says as a black person in America, I think you have more opportunity than black people not in America. Yeah, that is true. They do. The ideal identity politics is looking racism.
Looking for racism.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry. Jim Rhodes didn't get into the Iron Man until issue 169 or 148 issues later than Eddie March. Okay, I'll have to look that up.
She's not wrong.
The deconstruction writers are problem then and now. Absolutely. The fact that they never, I've been saying this for 7 years. 7 years now, and they're still doing it. If you're going to deconstruct something, in order for us to care, you got to build them back up.
Reconstruction.
But every time they deconstruct a character, they say, okay, here comes a new team. And they say, hey, we're going to deconstruct that same character. You can't. It's already been done. So they kept doing it and doing it and doing it. They never actually took the time to rebuild anything. All right, so it says Marvel begins its transition from comic publisher to a brand management company in 1968. That shift is in focus is what cemented in 1996 and made a reversal upon the company's absorption by Disney. As for DC, they've operated as brand management since the 1950s. Marvel just became their later decanted clone. What were you saying?
No, I just was... Yeah, decanted.
Yeah, I fixed it. I realized I said it wrong. That's our culprit. The big two abandoned the comic book publishing business for brand management business. The editors checked out, and good writing got thrown under the bus. Flashy art and sales gimmicks replaced big ideas and deep characters. Speculators drawn by the stunt marketed replaced readers. The subsequent bubble popped, and woke megacorps swooped in to pick the carcass clean. Restoring the culture will take a new breed of creator. Creators committed to telling high-stakes stories about relatable characters, engaging with the big ideas, not the type to expect from others what I'm unwilling to do myself. I've been working at just those kind of projects for years. Okay. I don't know if he said anything that we haven't said for the last 7 years. We need editors who are brave enough to say no. We need people who think outside of the identity politics, the incredibly racist identity politics. We need people who are willing to keep the characters who they are while taking characters in some sort of new direction, which I understand is rough to do. But even take an idea maybe that's already been done and find a new way to do it. I mean, for fuck's sake, they're going to make a movie out of a Supergirl story, which is freaking True Grit. They're literally remaking True Grit with Supergirl.
Well,
again,
don't they see it?
It's funny you say that about taking an old story and making a new idea out of it. That was Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane back in 2006, from Mary Jane's point of view, and like I said, it actually worked really well.
All right. Okay,
Yeah.
what were you about to say?
So here's the problem. As it stands, you can't do that. So because in order for characters to grow, what do they have to do? They've got to age.
Yeah.
And we know now, I mean, and that really kind of lays it out nicely, but it's true. They're now basically, most characters now are locked into a time frame. And as we were going through this, I realized that basically comic books, especially the big two comic books now, are more or less like sitcoms. Where if you think about all your classic sitcoms, they're in one box, one kind of time frame, and that's the time frame that those characters will always be in. And then you tell the stories within that. Well, there's only so many stories you can tell within that box before you're basically telling the same story over and over and over again, and that's what we're seeing now. So if you don't allow the characters to actually age and grow, there can be no development.
And as a follow-up, to explain why each of these characters haven't aged a day, they after the 20s, 30s, or even 40s, whereas is to explain but after constant exposure to extra outside extra dimensional energies, and just the bodies became soaked in them, and it effectively rendered them ageless. And
What if?
from a point they reached, I'll say because of those energies, and just they were aged right up to their prime, but again because of so much exposure, they've been rendered ageless, so they can still grow. Which you can also showcase that time has passed for them.
So how about we see Marvel is doing the Ultimate Spider-Man and the Ultimate Black Panther, and I'm not quite sure they're in the same universe, but what if they do an Ultimate line, or DC decides to do this without freaking collapsing everything, and they start making death mean something? That maybe they do promise a certain amount, 6 issues is 6 months or something along those lines, or at least 1 year is a year. It may only take 12 issues may only take a day, but when you start the next 12, it's I guess like Grant Morrison was doing, but you freaking continue the numbers. You got to create collectors. But it's continuing a year. It's the next time. So people are getting older. People are dying. People are changing in ways that actually mean something. I hate the fact, by the way, one of the big changes they let people do is all of a sudden Superman can change into animals or something along those lines, because they just needed that power for this comic. I love the Golden Age. I don't want modern comics to go back to the Golden Age. I want modern comics to stay in modern comics.
Well, that's been one of the real issues with the Miles Morales books, is his power set has gotten so OP over the years because the writers that would be brought in there, they had no idea of how to write for a limited power set. It would be, he needs to be able to shock, to be able to get out of this, he needs to be able to do this. Okay, so his powers now have grown. Now he has invisibility. Instead of getting away from Dr. Doom by using a power that he already has, he's got to be able to short circuit the armor. Yeah. I'll throw out one other thing, since I mentioned the idea of comics basically becoming sitcoms because they're not able to grow. So you kind of have two choices. Either you can write stories that have growth and have a meaning to it, as we see a lot of these comic book writers are trying to write something deeper than they're able to. Mm-hmm. You can't do that with a sitcom for the most part. You can do it every now and then, but you can't make every story arc like that. So then what do? You go back to the way comic books were in the 70s, in terms of you write an adventure and it's fun, and that's what it means. It's an adventure and it's fun and it's good guys beating bad guys, period. I'd like to see more single issues. And I think that would be great for new comic book readers.
One of the daunting things is if you go to the shop, oh, there's Superman, let me pick it up, and you're reading it, and you realize you're in the middle of a story that you don't quite understand because modern day comics don't have that freaking splash page. By the way, I did read a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I've got the review on From the Long Box, where it actually opens with a news report from
the current issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and it actually is April talking about what happened in the last issue. So, as a news report.
And
I like
that's I've liked that. They advertise as being what they are. They're Saturday morning cartoons, and they're continuing with that. They're not, well, I'm going to do a self-insert. We're going to change everything. Right. They're not putting Jenica in there because she wasn't in there.
I dug it.
Like I said, well, yeah, that's the whole thing. I remember in the early 2000s, Marvel would give you a recap previously in this issue. Thor did that. A lot of Spider-Man did that. So you knew the hell was going on because there'd be a month in between you get an issue.
Yep.